You may be seated. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 24. That's what we're going to be reading out of this morning. And I have a question as we start off. Are you the kind of person who you start reading a book and you really like it, you jump to the end to know how it ends before you finish the book? Anyone? Anyone? Do we got a few people? All right. I think I can identify. I've never done this. I have many friends and family who do. But I read this one book, and I was so riveted by it, I literally had to finish the book. I couldn't not finish it. I was like till 3:30 in the morning or something reading this book because I wanted to know how it was going to end. It was like, I was like anxious. Any of you, like, you can read something and you're like, holy man, it's just like you're in knots inside. I'm sure if they had some sort of feature and you're watching like a feature film, you're at the theater, and like, I just want to know how this thing ends, right? You're just like, you feel riveted and you're anxious. I was so curious. It's like, okay, so why do people jump to the end of the book, and why is there this compulsion? And so I decided, this is the third time I've ever used ChatGPT. I can't even say it, so you can tell I'm a novice, that I ever used it. But I was just kind of curious. I'm like, why do people, this is my question, why do people jump to the end of a book? And they gave me a bunch of things. I'm going to read the top three. Curiosity. Some readers simply can't resist the temptation to know how the story concludes. Impatience. A reader might be eager to find out what happens next. They may skip ahead to get a glimpse of the climax for resolution. And then the third one was anxiety or suspense. For some individuals, the suspense or tension in the story can be overwhelming, and they may skip ahead to alleviate the anxiety or uncertainty about the outcome. Any of you identify with any of those kind of feelings? What do those all have in common? There's some sort of like compulsion that's not necessarily conscious. It's just like, I just gotta know. And I think that's kind of interesting. I think that's like a human condition that we have. We want to know what is going to happen. We don't just do this with books, but we do this with life. We want to know what the future is going to hold. There's an undercurrent that you can see in our world and in human lives that we live with a fear of the unknown. We seek control of things and people to control ourselves so we can make sure that we can handle it. And we live with this subconscious belief that if we had this knowledge, that it would actually make a difference. Like we could actually change the course of future. Go ahead and show the slide that I have up there. This was something that was kind of interesting. End of the world, 10 possible dates. Now, just by putting that up there, some of your blood pressure just went up a couple notches. Tell me, you can skip the slide, take it off. It's traumatic. I know you all are going to have, trauma wounds from this. But end of the world. What's going to happen? I don't know about you, but I've seen an uptick of the number of people that are either asking me and people in social settings, media and social media, who are talking about all these big dramatic things that have happened and what's going to happen next. And they play to the emotions that we already have inside of us. And some of the lies that we have, that if we think that we knew, that actually we could change the course of history. We're not Marvel. Jeremy's going to be pleased that I brought up Marvel in a sermon. We're not going into the quantum realm and going back and forward in time to change the future. This is not reality. We live with this fear. And what's interesting in this human condition, it really is built on us. Our fear causes us to focus on ourselves. Our fear draws us to look for answers for things. Our fear has this subtle belief that we can actually do something about it. And if that's all true, then what's not happening? In our fear, we're having a hard time looking to Him. In our fear, we're having a hard time to realize that He has the answers we don't know. That the God who we sang about, who created all that exists, is one that we can trust, and He's trustworthy. And so we're seeing a confrontation between the world's systems, the world's kingdom, and God's kingdom. And this is what Jesus came and spoke to. This is the reality he was ushering in. Jesus was saying, there's a different kingdom. It runs in reverse, where he says, there is no fear. I love 1 John. He says, there is no fear in love because perfect love casts out all fear. That's the nature of his kingdom. But it comes through trusting him, not ourselves. So Jesus came to preach and live and usher in a new kingdom. This is what he's doing. This is what we've been reading. We're reading from the book of Matthew. We've been reading things that Jesus said that we often don't necessarily read that really help us get to know who he really is, to help us look to him. And Jesus is teaching and preaching and living out this new kingdom. So Jesus invites us to look to him and not to ourselves, to his resources and not our own limited ones, to look beyond the future that we can see to a future or in a future that's self-protective in our well-being, but to a future that he knows, and one that invites us to live beyond ourselves for something bigger and better in loving and caring for others. That we are called to live prepared for this kingdom and live out of it, but not in fear of it. When you think about the future, how many of you live with fear about the future? It could be tonight what you're having for dinner. It could be who wins the game this afternoon. It could be, what am I going to get my kids for Christmas? Are they going to like it? It could be, I'm sorry, Santa was doing that. It could be all these other things, right? It could be like, well, is there going to be World War III? What's going to happen in Israel? When's the thing in Ukraine going to resolve? Oh, but what also is happening with Azerbaijan and Armenia? Oh, and what's happening in Africa? And what's happening in South America? And you want me to keep going? No. Like, do I need to? Any of you stressed now? The message of Jesus in his kingdom was as revolutionary to his disciples then as it is to us today, and that's what Jesus wants to say to us in this time. So if you have your Bibles open, you can follow along with me or you can follow along on the screen, but let me just read our passage this morning that we're covering. Jesus left the temple. He was walking away when his disciples came to him. They wanted to call his attention to the temple buildings. Do you see all these things? Jesus asked. What I'm about to tell you is true. Not one of these will be left on top of another. Every stone will be overthrown. Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives. There the disciples came to him in private. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming? What will be the sign of the end? Jesus answered, keep watch, be careful that no one fools you. Many will come in my name. They will claim, I am the Messiah. They will fool many people. You will hear about wars. You will hear people talk about future wars. Don't be alarmed. Those things must happen. The end still isn't here. Nation will fight against nation. Kingdom will fight against kingdom. People will go hungry. There will be earthquakes in many places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then people will hand you over to be treated badly and killed. All nations will hate you because of me. At that time, many will turn away from their faith. They will hate each other. They will hand each other over to their enemies. Many false prophets will appear. They will fool many because evil will grow. Most people's love will grow cold. The one who remains strong in the faith will be saved. This is the good news. Let me say that again. This is the good news of the kingdom. It will be preached in the whole world. It will be a witness to all nations. Then the end will come. Does that sound like good news? Well, if you're in control of your own life and you think you're in control of your own destiny, it's not very good news. And even if God's going to do that, it doesn't sound like good news, because it's going to be hard and ugly. We're going to walk through this passage. There's so much more that I could say that I can't say. If you have questions, hit me up. We'll grab coffee, talk to you about it. But let's just walk through this. Jesus came to usher in a new kingdom with a new king. And the king isn't you. It's him. And the kingdom isn't of this world. It includes this world, but it's far beyond it. And so we want to look seriously at what Jesus is saying and why Matthew's recording this so that people, generations afterwards, can understand what is happening. We get to learn with them and from them in this passage. So the first thing I want to just mention here is there's the worship of the temple rather than worship at the temple. They're walking by the temple. And the disciples are like, can you believe this? This is amazing. Look at how wonderful the edifices are, the temple buildings, how strong they are. This is fantastic. I mean, they just had walked by the temple, and what does it say? He was walking away with his disciples, and they came to him. They wanted to call his attention to the temple buildings. The disciples are walking through Jerusalem. They weren't from Jerusalem. So I imagine the first time any of you walked through Yosemite Valley, or if as a child you walked through Disneyland, you're like, whoa. There is a sense of like appreciative awe or wonder. Like, that's amazing. And so the disciples are walking by, but they're kind of distracted by the building that they see. And Jesus uses it as an opportunity to say, yeah, that's not that great. It's nice, but it's not that great. They're standing in awe of the temple, and the temple's supposed to be the place where people are focused on God. And so the awe is supposed to be really on God and what he's doing, but they're walking by and looking at the temple, and that's what they're noticing. So they call their attention to it. Jesus is unimpressed by it, and probably not overly flattered that their attention is on the temple. But Jesus responds with the words, "Do you see what all these things?" Jesus has them look beyond the temple. It includes the temple, but it was more than the temple. He says, all these things that you're amazed by, they're going to be, what does it say? Will be thrown down. Will be thrown down, demolished. Some translations say, not one stone left standing on the other. What is Jesus doing? He's pointing out that the stuff that they're focusing on is the wrong thing. Jesus is basically saying, it's not as great as you guys think. We got to look beyond that, guys. It doesn't mean it's not important, but it's not the most important thing. So they leave this place where Jesus basically tells them, yeah, this thing's going to be destroyed. And they're walking, and it's about a 25 to 30-minute walk from the temple square area to where they are headed at the Mount of Olives. So they're walking for 20, 25 minutes. And they have some time to reflect. Now, Jesus had previously, you see it recorded in Matthew 13, talked about the end of time, that when Jesus is going to, he talks about his death, he talks about the things that are going to be reframed, he talks about the old will be gone, the new will become. There's this, he's already talked about kind of end of time things, that the things that you now know are going to be changed up really significantly. And so they're on this walk, and they're reflecting on what Jesus said, and every stone is going to be destroyed at the temple. What do you think is going through their mind? The temple's going to be destroyed? That thing's huge. That thing's massive. What's going to happen to me? If that's happening to that, what's going to happen to me? That's huge. That's strong. I'm just a human. What's happening to me? And so it leads them to want to have answers. They want to kind of jump to the end. They're looking for a sign. What is the sign that's going to tell us this is happening? Why would that be important? Unless they didn't recognize that they were going to be okay because they were with him. Unless they struggled to trust. I mean, you guys can look at your own life. You can think, man, I believe in God, but I don't like what looks like my future holds. I don't like what I see in the world around me. And isn't it our human nature to think, am I going to be okay if all this other stuff is going away? So we can't judge them too harshly, can we? We're in the same boat. But notice what he says. They're missing the signs. And I say signs plural. Look what is said. So they get to the Mount of Olives. Jesus is sitting down. It says, he was sitting down on the Mount of Olives. There, his disciples came to him in private. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming? What will be the sign of the end? They ask for the sign of the coming and the sign of the end. So they're asking for signs, and Jesus' response is beautiful. He says, keep watch. Be careful that no one fools you. Many will come in my name. They will claim that I am the Messiah. They will fool many people. You will hear about wars. You will hear about people talking about future wars. Don't be alarmed. Those things must happen, but the end still isn't here. Nation will fight against nation. Kingdom fight against kingdom. People will go hungry. There will be earthquakes in many places. All of these are the beginning of the birth pains. So what are they looking for? They're looking for signs, right? When will it be? Jesus didn't answer. What is the sign? Jesus doesn't explain very much, does he? He'll go on to say some more things, but what are they really asking? What are they really looking for? Security, hope, peace, a way to prepare, because they want to be sure that they're going to be okay. We do the same thing. We struggle when life doesn't go the way that we think it's supposed to go. When we see a future before us that doesn't look like what we thought it was going to look like, we feel the same way. It could be a diagnosis, a job loss, a breakup, a disappointment. It could be anything. We operate out of fear and pain. When will this happen? Or if something does happen, we want to know why it happened because we want to prevent ourselves from something like that happening again. Because we can't go back. The why isn't to solve the problem as to what already happened, because you can't go back in time and change what took place. You can only protect yourself from the future. So we're asking, what does this look like? We're frantically trying to sort this thing out, and I get it because I feel it in my own bones. Notice Jesus' response. He says, keep watch, be careful that no one fools you. And no one isn't just specific to a person. No one isn't an individual one. It is what the world says. It's a countercultural idea. Don't buy into what the world says. And of course, people in the world that try and reinforce the world's ideas and kingdom. Instead, Jesus says, keep watch, keep looking, keep trusting. Don't be fooled to think you or others have the answers. Don't trust what others say. Don't trust the rumors you hear. Don't even trust what you see. Keep watch. Keep your attention. Keep watch on who and what you trust. So of the things that Jesus lists, how many of them had already been true for Israel? Let's look at this for a second. And ask yourself, how many of this has been true even in our lifetime? When have there not been wars in our world? There were then and there are now. Small ones, big ones. When have there not been rumors of war? When have there not been people saying that the end is near? I mean, even in my lifetime, there was the Y2K, right? There was the Mayan calendar, the 21st of December 2012, that the end of the world was going to happen. What about Nostradamus? Lots of things there. What about Harold Camping, a nice religious fellow who said he was going to come again on May 21st, and then what didn't happen, he revised it and said, how about October 21st? Rumors. When have people not gone hungry? Every day. When have there not been concerns about future wars? All the time. When have there not been earthquakes? I Googled this one, didn't ChatGPT it. How often are there earthquakes? And they said thousands of earthquakes of varying size occur each year. Is it possible that all the anxiety and fear that they were feeling and all the anxiety and fear that we're feeling is because we're focused on it and the kingdom of this world? That we're struggling to trust him and look beyond this world? To believe that God wants to do something that's bigger and better and greater? We're just like them. And it's easy to get distracted, especially with the proliferation of so much noise, so much media out there, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's social media. I mean, we have so much information that we think that with all this information, we have all these answers and all this control, and all it's doing is making us anxious, freak out people who can't stay focused, even to the person in front of us because our phones are going off, let alone to God. Jesus says, keep watch, stay focused, be wise, be discerning. A lot of crazy stuff's going to happen, but don't focus there. Don't take your eyes off me. Don't stop trusting. I almost played this song, Don't Stop Believing, but you're lucky you get spared. Jesus goes on to explain that goes on to explain that the experience that we have is going to look different than what we might expect. And that experience of the reality is actually a part of the signs, because there were signs then that Israel all had. There are signs today that Israel had that says that he's all coming. When is he coming? Well, here's all your signs. Well, it was true then, it's true now, so what do we do about that? Jesus, hey, let me just add more fuel to the fire. Let me freak you out a little bit more. Here we go. You can all freak out. Then people will hand you over to be treated badly and killed. He's talking to people who were Jesus' followers. Notice what he says. All nations will hate you because of me. How many of you signed up for that one? What? I just signed up to go to heaven. At that time, many will turn away from their faith. They will hate each other. This isn't just people in society. This is like people who said they love Jesus are going to start hating each other. Oh, by the way, how divided are churches out there today? Religious people hating each other? Many false prophets will appear. They'll fool many people because their evil will grow. Most people's love will grow cold. But the ones who remain strong in the faith will be saved. Those who keep trusting in the face of that experience. It's not just about what people are saying is going to happen. It's not even about what you observe or your interpretation of what you think is happening, which is only partial anyway. And it's also not about what happens to us. And that's a scary thought, isn't it? And I'm in the same boat as you. Because I don't have control over all the things in my life. I don't know what's going to happen to my health. I don't know what's going to happen when I'm driving down the road with whatever could happen. I don't know what's going to happen with my job. I don't know what's going to happen with any of the world wars that are potentially out there that everyone seems to be concerned about. Here's your prepper's tip for all of you who like to be prepared. Be prepared for something different. Not for life to go well, for Jesus to get really popular, for everything to go right. Eventually it will. Jesus wins. But what did he tell us to prepare for? Basically everything to go wrong. So if you're in that mix and everything is difficult for you or you find life to be challenging, then here's your sign. He's coming. Keep watch. Because the way that we prepare isn't by all the things that we do. And it's not wrong to have food, have stuff for emergencies, to care for one. It's none of that's bad. But we can't take our eyes off him. Many will stop believing. They'll turn from their hate. They're going to hate you. They're going to turn from their faith. They're going to hate you. We struggle to believe that God would allow us to suffer, don't we? When I see people suffer, when I saw cancer growing outside of my father-in-law in his body when he was changing wounds, when I see people hurt and divided and fighting, when I see people treat each other terribly, it screams, this is all wrong. But that's the kingdom of this world. And we're living for one beyond it. God has got you and all things in his hands. He's holding you and the future. Jesus suffered and died. And if we're following him, why do we think we won't? We're going to be maligned for the same things he was maligned for. We're going to be hurt for the same reasons he was hurt. Because we're proclaiming a different message than what the world is proclaiming. A different reality than Satan and his emissaries are proclaiming in this world. And things will get worse before they're better. But notice what he says. In the midst of this, in the midst of their circumstances and all that's happening, he invites them to look at a positive sign of the truth of God's coming kingdom. Notice what he says in verse 14. The good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world. It will be a witness to all nations. Then the end will come. What does that mean? That means that more and more people are going to hear about God's love. They're going to recognize the dissonance of their life in this world, and they're going to be drawn to him because they recognize there's a hope beyond this world. We're not talking about a kingdom, a thing that's going to, the end of the signs of the end of the age are going to be that everything's going to be annihilated, it's all going to burn. No, it's the consummation of all things, that Jesus who came, who lived a life, who died on a cross and rose again, and who offers us life, both in this life but through it into eternity, that king is going to come and bring the consummation of all things, not the annihilation of all things. God's going to mediate sin. He's going to destroy all of the junk in this world, in this kingdom today, that stands against reflecting his glory back to him. And we get to participate with him in living beyond this world for something so much greater. But we got to keep watch. But it's something for us to look forward to. And that's why Paul can say, even in his suffering, he can delight. We don't delight in evil. We don't delight when we see people hurt. But we find hope and encouragement. When people pass from us, we find hope beyond it. Jump down a little bit further in the passage with me. There's a few things that Jesus says that's germane to this that I think we have to understand. The point isn't knowing when it culminates, it's knowing that it's coming. Verse 35 and 36, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never fail. That's not saying that literal heaven is going to be destroyed. It doesn't mean that little earth is going to be fully destroyed. This is a contrastive statement of saying that what God says is true and trustworthy. My words will never pass away. You can count on this. That's why Jesus said earlier, when we read it, Jesus said, you can count on this is true. This is a trustworthy statement, is another translation. Notice verse 36. No one knows the day or the hour, only the Father. Jesus says, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't even need to know that. If you were in a hierarchical structure of a business, it'd be like, it's beyond your pay grade. You can't handle it, or maybe it's like the movie. You can't handle the truth. I don't know, whichever one you resonate with. The reality is that God doesn't give us that because if he thought we could handle it, first of all, that'd be great. He knows we can't. And if we thought we could handle it, that'd be a problem because we'd stop trusting. And God says, that's not the way to live prepared. Keep watch. There's a kingdom truth. This idea of keeping watch and paying attention and staying focused on him. And this is it. Trusting Jesus is the power that saves, gives life, and prepares us for his future. That's what it looks like. And we are invited to trust him. We trust him that his word is true. We trust his character and his nature. We can encounter and experience him. We trust that he literally holds all things together. He holds us and all things together. Colossians 1:17 says, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Jesus says, keep watch, keep trusting. Jesus is the power that saves, gives life, and prepares us for his future coming. So how do we keep watch? I want to give you just a few things that may be helpful. Number one, rest in his love. That is the center of it all. You absolutely, fundamentally have to believe that he is crazy about you, that he delights in you, not because you're perfect, but because you're his. What Jesus did on the cross, that's what makes you perfect. That's not your job to save yourself. You have a Savior. Rest in his love. Trust him in what he says. He's the only one you can truly trust. You can't trust what the world says, as we saw. You can't trust rumors. You can't trust even your experience. Don't believe the voices that try to get you to fear. His voice of truth says, I love you and you can trust me regardless of what you're walking through. It won't fail you. Focus on him, not this world. Whatever captures our attention eventually captures our hearts. Whatever captures our attention will eventually capture our hearts. Stay focused on him. Look and live beyond our circumstances. Circumstances are limited. God's promises aren't. This kingdom is limited. God's kingdom is not. Make choices out of confidence in God and his love. Your choice to trust is what makes the difference in your own life. The more you trust him, doesn't mean your life's going to get better, but as far as what you might experience in this world, but it does mean that you will experience a peace that is not accessible until you choose to trust. You will experience a joy that is will not be experienced fully unless you choose to trust. That is the message of Jesus. Trust that his power saves, gives life, and prepares us for his future coming. That's what we're invited to do. Every week we take communion together. Our kids are back in here, so this is a wonderful time. We are going to share in communion together. It is the